princess, and placed one document on the table, and Catherine's name was written where nobody expected it. But when Camilla's family learned who would control the queen's private estate, their reaction turned a quiet inheritance decision into a royal family crisis. Before we reveal why and backed Catherine, and the hidden condition that could change everything, hit like and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from today? The room changed the moment princess and opened the final page. Until then, Catherine had barely spoken. She had arrived expecting a private discussion about the late queen's legacy, personal possessions, family papers, and a private estate that had remained largely outside public conversation. Then, and looked down at the document. There was only one name beside the estate. Catherine. William immediately looked at his wife. Catherine didn't move. Even Charles seemed caught off guard, and read the wording again, slower this time. Within this dramatized scenario, Catherine wasn't simply being given access to the estate. She was being placed in control of how its private legacy would be protected. That meant something much bigger than property. There were rooms containing personal belongings, boxes of correspondence, objects connected to decades of royal history, and potentially decisions about who would, or would not, be allowed access. Charles finally broke the silence. Why Catherine? And didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed the document and placed her hand over it. That hesitation made William suspicious. If this were simply an inheritance decision, there would be no reason for secrecy. Catherine finally asked the question everyone was avoiding. Had the queen herself chosen her? And looked directly at Catherine. Then she said there was another instruction, a separate one, and it had never been intended for public release. Before, and could explain further, an aide entered carrying an urgent message. Word of the meeting had apparently reached Camilla's side of the family, and the reaction was already beginning. Someone wanted to know why Catherine had been named. Someone else wanted to know whether the arrangement could be challenged. Charles looked frustrated. William looked toward the door, and remained completely calm. Because the argument outside that room was happening too early. They knew Catherine's name. They knew about the estate. What they didn't know was why the queen had apparently wanted Catherine connected to it in the first place, and reached beneath the first document and removed a second sealed page. Then she looked at William. This is the part they won't like, and broke the seal slowly. Nobody interrupted her. The first document had named Catherine. The second explained why. And almost immediately, William realized this was not an ordinary inheritance arrangement. The instructions separated the estate into two categories. Property could be inherited, but the queen's private legacy, letters, personal records, family objects, and decisions about future access required something different. A custodian. Someone the queen believed would protect those things without turning them into influence. And read the next section. Catherine's responsibility was not simply to possess the estate. It was to preserve it. That distinction changed the atmosphere. Catherine looked uncomfortable. She hadn't asked for this. William knew that. Charles knew it too. But outside the room, the decision could easily look very different. Catherine had just been placed at the center of something valuable, private, and emotionally tied to the late queen. And Camilla's family had apparently expected at least some continued access. Charles asked whether the queen had specifically restricted anyone, and paused. Then she turned the page. There it was. Not a list of band names. Something much more careful. Any future access to certain private materials would require approval from the person entrusted with protecting the estate. Catherine. William immediately understood the consequence. This wasn't simply about what Catherine had received. It was about what everyone else would now have to ask her permission to see. Then Charles's phone vibrated. A message had arrived from Camilla. She had heard enough to know Catherine had been named, but apparently not enough to understand the second document. Charles read the message twice and watched him carefully. What does she want? Charles placed the phone face down. Camilla wanted the meeting stopped until she could attend. Anne's expression didn't change. She gathered the papers, but left one page on the table. William glanced down. At the bottom was a handwritten instruction none of them had discussed. Just 7 words. This responsibility must remain with the direct line. William looked up. Because if those words meant what he thought they meant, Catherine wasn't necessarily the final destination of the queen's private estate. She was protecting it for someone who came next. Camilla arrived before the meeting could end. She didn't raise her voice. That made the tension worse. Charles stood as she entered, But Camilla's attention went directly to the papers in front of Anne. She had already heard the headline version. Catherine had been named. What Camilla didn't know was why. Is this already decided? And remained calm. The instruction was decided long before today. That answer stopped Camilla. She looked toward Charles. If the late queen had personally left instructions concerning the estate, challenging Catherine now could mean challenging something much more powerful than Anne's judgment. It could mean challenging the queen's final wishes. Camilla asked to see the document and gave her the first page, not the second. Camilla immediately noticed. There's more. Nobody answered. Then the conversation shifted. Camilla explained that members of her family had long-standing connections to charitable work, private events, and objects associated with Charles's household. They weren't demanding ownership, she insisted. They wanted reassurance that Catherine's new position wouldn't quietly close every door. William finally spoke. This isn't about your family. Camilla turned toward him. Then why are they the ones suddenly outside it? The question landed harder than William expected. Catherine had remained silent until then. She finally said she had never asked to control anyone's access, and she would not treat the estate as a weapon. That should have lowered the temperature. Instead, Anne reached for the sealed instruction. Because there was still one detail Camilla hadn't heard. The queen had apparently wanted responsibility to remain connected to the direct line. Camilla looked at Catherine, then William, and suddenly the implications became clearer. If Catherine was only protecting the estate for the next generation, then this wasn't simply about choosing her over Camilla's family. Someone else stood behind Catherine in the arrangement. Someone younger. Someone whose future position made the queen's instruction far more significant. Charles asked Anne to finish reading, and unfolded the final section. Then she stopped, because the next name written there wasn't William's. It was George's. For the first time, Camilla looked genuinely surprised. George. Not William. Not Anne. Not even Catherine permanently. The queen's instruction appeared to place Catherine in control of the private estate for one reason: to protect it until the next generation was ready. And that changed everything. William leaned closer as Anne continued reading. Within this dramatized scenario, Catherine would oversee the estate, preserve its private correspondence and possessions, and control sensitive access. But eventually, responsibility could pass directly toward George. The estate wasn't simply a gift. It was a bridge. From the late queen, through Catherine, to the future of the direct royal line. Camilla immediately saw the problem. If that interpretation stood, her own family wouldn't merely have been overlooked today. They had never been intended to become part of the estate's long-term future at all. Charles asked whether his mother had explained why, and nodded. But before answering, she looked toward Catherine. The queen had apparently believed Catherine possessed something more important than rank: restraint. She trusted Catherine to preserve private history without using it to strengthen her own position. Catherine looked uncomfortable with the praise. Camilla looked unconvinced. Then she asked the question everyone had been avoiding. What exactly is inside this estate that requires this much protection? Silence. William looked at Anne. Charles lowered his eyes. And Catherine suddenly realized the meeting had never really been about land, and reached for another inventory. Jewelry was listed. Private correspondence. Personal photographs, several sealed boxes, and one collection of letters had a restriction written beside it, not to be opened without special authorization. William's expression changed. Camilla noticed. Whose letters? And didn't answer. Not immediately, because revealing the name attached to those papers could turn an inheritance disagreement into something far more emotional. The queen hadn't simply protected property for George's generation. She had protected a part of the family's past that someone inside that room might desperately want to see. And when Anne finally turned the inventory around, Charles recognized the handwriting before anyone else did. Charles recognized the handwriting immediately. His expression changed before Anne said a word. Catherine noticed. So did William. The sealed collection wasn't valuable because of money. It was valuable because of what it might contain. Private correspondence the queen had apparently chosen to keep away from public scrutiny. And closed the inventory. Camilla immediately asked who had written the letters. Anne's answer was careful. Some belonged to the queen. Others had been sent to her. But the instruction attached to the collection was unusually strict. The papers were to remain sealed until the person responsible for the estate decided the family was ready. That person was now Catherine. Suddenly, her new role felt much heavier. She wasn't simply protecting an estate. She was protecting secrets. Camilla asked whether any of the correspondence concerned Charles, and didn't answer. William stepped in. If the Queen had deliberately sealed the letters, he argued, opening them simply because the family was curious would defeat the entire purpose of Catherine's appointment. Camilla turned toward him. This isn't curiosity if those letters concern people still living. For once, William had no immediate response. Charles remained strangely quiet. Then Catherine asked and whether she knew what was inside, and hesitated. She hadn't read the letters, but she knew why the Queen had separated them from everything else. Years earlier, Elizabeth had apparently made it clear that certain family disputes should never be allowed to become weapons during the next reign. That sentence changed the room. Camilla's expression hardened. William looked toward Charles, and Charles finally asked the question nobody else wanted to say aloud. Was my mother protecting the family from those letters? He paused. Or protecting those letters from the family? And looked down at the sealed inventory. Before she could answer, another document slipped from beneath it. A short handwritten instruction. Catherine picked it up. Only one sentence appeared beneath the Queen's signature. If disagreement begins over these papers, the custodian must not surrender them. Catherine looked across the table. Because disagreement had already begun, and for the first time, everyone understood why the Queen may have chosen her. Nobody expected Catherine to make the next move. Until that moment, she had treated the estate as something placed in her hands, not something she had fought to control. But the Queen's handwritten instruction changed that. If disagreement begins, the custodian must not surrender the papers. Catherine read the sentence once more. Then she closed the folder. Camilla immediately understood. You're refusing access? Catherine shook her head. I'm following the instruction. The distinction mattered, but it didn't make the room any calmer. Camilla argued that if the letters concerned Charles or decisions that had affected their family, keeping them sealed could create more suspicion than opening them. William disagreed. The moment Catherine broke the condition because someone applied pressure, the Queen's protection became meaningless. Then Charles surprised everyone. He asked Catherine for the letters himself. The room went silent. Catherine looked toward William. He didn't speak. Then toward Anne, and didn't move. This decision belonged to Catherine. For several seconds, she seemed torn between respecting the king standing in front of her and honoring the Queen who had apparently trusted her with the papers. Finally, Catherine answered. No. Camilla stared at her. Even Charles appeared stunned. Catherine explained that she would not open the collection simply because the family had become uncomfortable with not knowing what was inside. If the Queen had wanted Charles to receive the letters immediately, she could have left them directly to him. She hadn't. That was the first moment Catherine truly became the estate's custodian rather than merely its named recipient. But Camilla's frustration was growing. Because from her perspective, Catherine now controlled private material that might concern people who had no power to see it. Then, and revealed one final condition. There was a circumstance under which the sealed collection could be opened. Not by Charles, not by Camilla, and not by Catherine acting alone. The Queen had required the approval of two people. Catherine was one, and looked toward the document. The identity of the second person had been written separately, and when she read the name, William immediately realized the Queen had planned for this exact confrontation, and looked down at the instruction again. The second name was not William. It was George. For a moment, nobody spoke. Camilla looked confused. Charles looked even more surprised. George was still young. Why would the Queen place part of such a sensitive decision in his hands? Then, and explain the condition. Catherine would protect the letters now, but they could not be opened simply because the current generation demanded answers. The second approval was tied to George, and would only become active when he was old enough to assume the responsibility himself. Suddenly, the Queen's plan made sense. She had removed the decision from the people most emotionally connected to the past. Charles couldn't demand the letters. Camilla couldn't pressure Catherine. William couldn't simply override the arrangement. And Catherine couldn't open them alone. The Queen had placed time between the secret and the people who might be hurt by it. Charles leaned back. For the first time, he seemed to understand what his mother had done. She hadn't necessarily been hiding the truth forever. She had been delaying it until the family could face it without turning those letters into ammunition. Camilla wasn't convinced. What if those papers affect us now? And answered carefully. Then the Queen had apparently accepted that risk. Catherine remained quiet, but William could see the pressure building on her. She now controlled an estate Camilla's family was furious about, letters Charles wanted to understand, and a decision ultimately connected to William's own son. Then an aide entered. A private request had arrived from Camilla's family. They wanted a formal review of Catherine's control over the estate. William's expression hardened. Camilla immediately insisted she hadn't authorized it. That changed the atmosphere again. Because if Camilla hadn't requested the challenge, someone in her family had acted without her and asked to see the request. She read the first page, then the second, and stopped. The challenge wasn't focused on the letters. It was focused on something much larger. They were questioning whether Catherine should have been named owner of the estate at all, and read the request twice. This was no longer a complaint. It was a challenge. Someone from Camilla's family was questioning whether Catherine should have control of the Queen's private estate at all. Their argument was carefully framed. Catherine had married into the royal family. If the estate contained material affecting multiple branches of that family, why should one person have the power to decide who could see it? Camilla looked furious. Not with Catherine, with her own family. She insisted she had never authorized the challenge. William wasn't convinced that distinction mattered anymore. Once the request entered palace channels, the dispute had moved beyond private frustration. Catherine finally spoke. She wasn't interested in fighting anyone for the estate. If and believed she should step aside, she would. And immediately stopped her. No. One word. Final. And placed the Queen's instruction back on the table. Catherine hadn't appointed herself. William hadn't appointed her, and hadn't invented the arrangement. Within this dramatized scenario, the decision had been left deliberately, and changing it simply because people disliked the outcome would destroy the very protection the Queen had created. Then Charles noticed something. The challenge referred repeatedly to ownership, but the Queen's private instruction repeatedly used another word. Custodian. Charles asked, and whether Catherine actually owned everything outright, and paused. Then she revealed the distinction nobody outside the room seemed to understand. Some property belonged to Catherine, but the most sensitive parts of the estate were being held under conditions. Catherine had control. She did not have unlimited freedom. And eventually, parts of that responsibility were intended to move toward George. That discovery weakened the challenge immediately. But William wasn't satisfied. He wanted to know who had filed it, and turned to the final page. There was a signature. Camilla recognized it instantly. Her expression changed. Because the person challenging Catherine wasn't some distant advisor. It was someone close enough to Camilla to know details that had never been publicly discussed. And suddenly William had a much more troubling question. How did Camilla's family know what was inside the Queen's private arrangement before and had even finished revealing it? William didn't care about the challenge anymore. He cared about the leak. The request from Camilla's family contained details that should have been known only to the people inside and's private meeting. The estate, Catherine's authority, even the restrictions surrounding access. Someone had been talking. Charles immediately ordered the papers collected. Camilla looked furious. She insisted she had shared nothing with her family. William believed her, or at least wanted to, because if Camilla hadn't leaked the information, the alternative was worse. Someone inside the royal household had, and returned to the original estate papers. She wanted to know exactly who had handled them before the meeting. Only a small number of people had access. That narrowed the possibilities quickly. Then Catherine noticed something. The challenge mentioned Catherine being named owner, but an sealed instruction had never described her that way. It called her custodian. That meant whoever leaked the information hadn't seen the complete document. They had heard an incomplete version. William immediately remembered the first meeting. Before and opened the second sealed page, an aide had entered carrying a message. Someone outside the room already knew Catherine's name, but they didn't yet understand the conditions. The leak had happened before the second page was opened. Suddenly, the timeline became clear. Someone had discovered Catherine's name early, assumed she had been given complete ownership, and rushed the information toward Camilla's family. The challenge had been built around a misunderstanding. Charles wanted it withdrawn immediately. Camilla agreed, but wasn't finished. Because the false assumption had accidentally exposed something useful. The Queen had designed the arrangement so that anyone focused only on ownership would miss its real purpose. Catherine wasn't being rewarded. She had been given a burden. Protect the estate, protect the letters, and eventually protect the transfer toward George. Then, receive confirmation that Camilla's family would withdraw the challenge. The crisis appeared to be ending. But Catherine asked one final question. Why had the Queen chosen her instead of Anne? And looked at Catherine for a long moment. Then she reached for the last handwritten note. Because the answer had been there from the beginning. And it had nothing to do with property. It had everything to do with what the Queen believed Catherine would one day become. And unfolded the final handwritten note. This time, Catherine's name appeared beside something far more important than property: trust. Within this dramatized scenario, the Queen had apparently believed the estate would eventually become difficult to protect, not because of its financial value, but because too many people would attach their own history to what was inside. Letters, photographs, jewels, private memories, and secrets that could reopen old wounds. And explained that the Queen needed someone close enough to understand the family, but disciplined enough not to use its history as a weapon. That was why she had chosen Catherine. Not William, not Charles, and not in herself. Catherine would stand beside the future king while remaining one step removed from the direct succession. She could protect the past without personally inheriting the crown. William looked at his wife. Suddenly, what had appeared to be an extraordinary inheritance looked more like an extraordinary responsibility. Camilla remained quiet. Her family's challenge had already begun collapsing once the full arrangement became clear. They had reacted to Catherine being named owner. But Catherine had never been given unlimited control. She was the guardian of something intended to survive her. Eventually, George would inherit responsibility for the next generation. Camilla finally looked toward Catherine. Then protected. No argument. No congratulations. Just acceptance. Catherine nodded and gathered the documents, but left the sealed letters untouched. Those secrets would remain exactly where the Queen had intended them to remain. For now, Charles stood and looked once more at his mother's handwriting. The argument had begun over who owned the estate. But ownership had never been the real story. The Queen had created something more careful, a bridge between generations, and had revealed it. Catherine would protect it. George could one day inherit it. And Camilla's family, furious at first, had discovered that there was no simple prize to fight over. Because Catherine hadn't been handed the Queen's private estate merely as a reward. She had been handed the responsibility of deciding when the royal family was finally ready to face what the Queen had left behind.